But I mean, it is a question again. I mean, there is a certain ideal some people have that the best professor is one who you get a great education from and you never know what they actually believe. I don't really believe that. Again, I think you can really detect it, and it's better to be sort of open and honest about what you believe, but certainly that's true. I think there is a certain danger, though, that I'm a little bit alarmed to learn that people are just being fired on the basis of anonymous student evaluations that claim certain things. Because again, one of the things that happens with controversial scholars is there is a danger that someone who is very controversial, left or right, is going to run into students who deeply dislike them and give them very bad evaluations. And so you have to be, I think, careful in that about how you do student evaluations. I think it is important to listen to how well what students have to say, but students don't always know the best method of educating them, and students certainly don't agree about the best method of educating them. And you'll find some students who want to hear a bias, and some students who never want to hear that kind of bias. You know, I think that the way that your teachers are teaching you is admirable. I think that's in many ways an ideal that a lot of professors ought to do. But again, we have to, in higher education, create flawed systems. We create systems that don't create perfection, because you can't create perfection or impose perfection. What you have to do is allow for the freedom of professors in many ways to make mistakes, to teach things badly, because the alternatives are that you'll have professors who are afraid to speak their minds or afraid to have students speak their minds in classes. And you know, and there's a case I wrote about in my book about a professor who was fired not for what he said in class, but for what he allowed his students to say in class about Israel. And so you have those kind of biases that can exist. And so I think we need to make sure that that not all teachers have to teach the same way, and not all students have to learn the same way. And I think one of the things you said about students not being able to escape from the tyranny of the campus once they're there, the fact is students do have lots of options to escape. If there's a particularly bad or evil professor out there, students know how to avoid them and usually can. And so what I hope is that there is that kind of discussion and willingness to engage people who aren't evil professors but merely disagree with you. And I think that's the critical point.
On the last point first, whether we're picking the wrong people to educate students, oh yeah. One of our previous speakers here, who I hope you get to hear someday, Richard Vedder, Ohio University economist, said the average GPA in schools of education is 3.5. If they can hold the glass to your mouth and you fog it up, you get a 3.5, he says. If you can't, they mark you incomplete. He told it much better. Anyway, so there is that. I remember when I first came to AIA, there was one time we had Reed Irvine still with us, Don's dad, and we had an intern who was still an undergrad, so we had a bunch of us ranging in age from 18 to 80. Not one of us could remember a time when education was not dominated by the left of center. Not one. That's what, a 70-year time span, you know? 62-year time span. There is a difference, though, because I had liberal professors mostly too. However, they did not grade you. My professors did not grade me on their beliefs. That is no longer the case. High school or college, you know. I had a high school guidance counselor. I managed to have the only football coach who was a liberal, you know. And 4 of us used to argue with him every day. He never shut us down. It was in his authority to do so. He never did. You don't find liberals like that anymore. Not John is in that group, but outside, you don't find liberals in education like that anymore. Few and far between.